to episode 2 of the Cult of Asaram. In case you missed the story so far, I will link part 1 of the video in the description box below. So when we last left off, I was telling you that allegations of illegal activities, including black magic related deaths, had surfaced against Asaram Bapu in 2008. Despite court battles and controversies, Asaram continued accumulating wealth through various ventures, presenting himself as a saint while facing numerous legal challenges, especially against illegal appropriation of land. I also told you about his rather strange modus operandi of getting girls. Now I will discuss in detail the case that actually took him down. Like the great philosopher Aristotle tells us, all great characters in all great plays must have hamartia, a tragic flaw. Shakespeare's famous character of King Lear blindly succumbed to flattery. Othello was susceptible to jealousy, and our character, the phony godman, Asaram's weakness was for women, which turned out to be his hamartia. But before I go any further, let me tell you about the source of all this information that you're going to hear in today's episode. It's from a book called Gunning for the Godman. It was written by the police commissioner Ajay Lamba, who was in charge of arresting and bringing Asaram to justice. The book is linked in the description box below. The book basically narrates events which start around August 15 of 2013 and go on from there. Fun fact, in case you're not from India, August 15th is India's Independence Day. The story of Asaram's ultimate fall from grace starts on August 21st of 2013. It begins something like this. Commissioner, whose name is Ajay Lamba, is sitting in his beautiful office in the city of Jodhpur, which is in the state of Rajasthan in India. This gentleman is minding his business, doing whatever police commissioners do, when he receives a phone call from a journalist asking him about his opinion about the case that was filed on the previous day, which was August 20th of 2013, by an unnamed 16-year-old girl in a Delhi police station against Asaram for SA, which occurred in Rajasthan. Hearing this, the commissioner was completely rattled because he had no clue about the events that had happened so far. Next, a team of Delhi police officers brings this girl and her family from New Delhi to Jodhpur because, as I mentioned earlier, the girl claimed that the assault had occurred in Rajasthan. On August 21st of 2013, after reaching Commissioner Lamba's office with the entire Delhi police team, the unnamed girl narrates the events of her assault to a female police officer by the name of Mukta Pratik. And this is what the girl says happened. She says that she's 16 years old and studies at one of the residential schools run by the Asaram Trust in Chindwara, which is in the state of Madhya Pradesh, and she originally belongs to a town in Shahjahanpur, which is in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which means she was studying in a different state from where her parents lived. Her father owned a very small transportation business and her mother was a homemaker. As true devotees of Asaram, the parents chose to admit their daughter and their son to schools run by the Asaram Trust. After being there for a while, on August 2nd and August 3rd of 2013, this unnamed girl complained of not feeling well. So her fellow classmates informed the warden of the school, whose name is Miss Shilpi. They tell the warden that the girl is in fact so sick that she has fallen on the floor twice. Despite informing the warden of the school, the warden of the girl's sick condition, she is not taken to the doctor. On the 5th day of her illness, the child is asked to visit the school's director's office, and when she reaches there, another girl is already standing in the room, and the director looks at both of them and informs them that they are not suffering from any ordinary fever but the influence of evil spirits. He tells the unnamed girl that she has to pray, chant, and perform some rituals to rid herself of evil spirits. The day after that, the warden, whose name is Miss Shilpi, comes to the girl's room again and reinforces to the unnamed girl that she is under the influence of spirits that are outside everyone's control and only Asaram Babu can cure her. The child is then asked to inform her younger brother, who studies in the same school, but lives in the boys' dormitory, and inform her own parents who stay in Shahjahanpur in Uttar Pradesh. The child is actually so sick that she cannot inform anyone by herself. So Miss Shilpi calls up her younger brother, who in turn informs her parents. The parents rush to the residential school the next day, but they're prevented from meeting their own daughter. On August 9 of 2013, the next day they are finally allowed to meet their child on August 10 of 2013. The parents then rush their girl to the capital New Delhi to get in touch with the godman Asaram personally so that he can cure their daughter. The parents try for 3 days and are finally informed that Asaram will be available for a one-on-one in another state, which is the state of Rajasthan, and more specifically in the city of Jodhpur. So the parents rush their daughter next to Jodhpur and finally reach there on August 14 of 2015. On that day, about 150 of the most prominent devotees of Asaram were with him in Jodhpur, and Asaram meets the family in front of the gathering and then tells them to come back at 10 p.m. and tells them to stay over at Vishnu's farmhouse. Now, by the way, everyone is in Vishnu's farmhouse. Vishnu is one of those prominent devotees who had dedicated a space of his farmhouse for the godman's use. The family then stays there till 10 p.m. and then finally go from the main house towards a slightly secluded part of the same farmhouse, which houses a rather lavish guest house, which is lovingly called a kutia. In English, it means a small, humble cottage, but it was not small or humble. As the parents and the daughter reach there, Asaram Bapu himself takes the time to show them around the guest house and the adjoining garden and asks her about her plans after grade 12. She informs him that she plans to become a chartered accountant. Hearing this, Asaram chuckles and tells her that all chartered accountants sit at his feet and that she instead should become a teacher. Then the parents and the girl are instructed to go back to the main farmhouse for the night and then return the next day around 10 p.m. And that would be the night of August 15, 2013. The godman explains the quote-unquote ritual to the parents and asks them to sit 500 yards away from his cottage and chant some really specific mantras. While the 16-year-old girl is taken inside a completely dark cottage and the child is subjected to you know what for the next 1.5 hours. While all this is happening, both the parents are sitting outside in the garden 500 yards away and are chanting whatever mantras they had been instructed to. Then their daughter emerges from the dark guest house and doesn't speak a single word. The girl is then driven back to her home in Shahjahanpur in Uttar Pradesh. After reaching home, she refuses to eat a single morsel of food or drink a single drop of water. But the parents don't push her, thinking that the child is suffering from the after effects of an exorcism. After more than 24 hours of being at home, this unnamed girl finally tells her mother what happened to her on that fateful night. Both mother and daughter cry uncontrollably for the next few hours and then finally inform the father. The father is enraged about this entire betrayal. He had been a devotee of the godman for years. He had hung on each word of this so-called saint. He was so furious that he takes his family to New Delhi to confront the godman in person. The family then makes its way to a very large gathering where this godman is supposed to be preaching on August 19 of 2013. The family tries to meet the godman for the entire day in Delhi. They in fact stand at the gathering from sunup, but they are in fact shooed away by security personnel. Dejected and utterly betrayed, the family then go to the nearest police station, which is situated in the Kamla Market area of New Delhi, and they file an FIR late in the night of August 19, 2013. Police immediately take the girl to Lok Nayak Hospital, and once the assault kit verifies all of her allegations, the police then file an official FIR at 2 a.m. So the date basically changes from August 19 to August 20. Then the family is taken the next day to the city of Jodhpur, which is on August 21st of 2013, as that's exactly where the assault had taken place. Under the new Indian law called POSCO, which is the Protection of Children Against Sexual Assaults Act of 2012, the definition of assault has been expanded to include both oral and digital assault. Since the victim was underage, the responsibility of proving his innocence lay on the 72-year-old godman and not on the 16-year-old child. Since this was no ordinary man, the police had to dot every single I and cross every single T, present all evidence with immense scrutiny. So the police start by verifying the victim's testimony and her family's background. Secondly, they had to manage millions of followers who could descend at any point at all police stations and potentially turn aggressive. Thirdly, they had to gather the evidence from all relevant places. The first being Chindwara, where the residential school was located. The second being Delhi, where the family tried to confront the godman for one whole day. And the third being Jodhpur, which was the actual scene of crime. Once the story and the evidence and the medical report lined up, the Commissioner of Police, whose name is Ajay Lamba, formed a core team of officers. I'm going to tell you their names because these are really brave people. We'll start with Officer Chanchal Mishra, followed by Inspector Satya Prakash, Inspector Satish Jahangir, Inspector Mukta Prateek, Inspector Madan Beniwal, Inspector Rajveer, Inspector Bawar Singh, Inspector Ramdev Singh, Inspector Nitin Dave, Inspector Babu Singh Rajpurohit, followed by Head Constable Jamshed Khan. I tell you these names because imagine going against a man who had 40 million followers at his disposal. So these officers were extremely brave, and wait till you hear what they had to go through for the next 5 years. Between 23rd to 30th of August 2013, some of these officers start by gathering anecdotal evidence and intelligence, and some of them come to know that hundreds of girls had suddenly withdrawn from Asaram's residential schools over the years, but their parents were too scared to come forward. But these were just allegations. So they had to find actual evidence for it. The investigation gained even more momentum around August 23rd of 2013, and the police had acquired a probable cause for subpoena, which in India is called summons, by the 25th of August 2013. Meanwhile, Asaram's lawyers approached the police in anticipation, wanting to know about the investigation and seeking to apply for an anticipatory bail. But the entire investigation was done on the down low. The police also feared that the witnesses might turn hostile and might refuse to cooperate. Ajay Lamba, the commissioner who was in charge of the investigation, says in his book, quote, "The investigation revealed the character of the girl was impeccable. As for Asaram, it was discovered that he had some sort of sex addiction and demanded a new nubile girl every night," unquote. Later in the same chapter, he further writes, quote, "Some individuals associated with Asaram claimed that his entire ashram management, especially the matron of the Chindwara ashram, Shilpi, and the godman's major domo, Prakash, were always on the lookout for underage, attractive girls studying or staying in the ashram who could be brainwashed into believing that the accused was God incarnate," unquote. Later on, in another chapter, he further writes, quote, "The young girls, usually from poor families, were either paid off later or threatened with dire consequences," unquote. By the way, none of the information about this sex addiction made it to trial because every single person who reported it refused to testify against him. On August 25th of 2013, the police officers, most of whom were in plain clothes, finally reached the gates where Asaram was supposed to be hiding in another city, which is called the city of Indore, in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And they stood at the gate of a very large compound, negotiating with hundreds of followers who were gathered to support Asaram. Despite being the police, they were of course outnumbered. That's why they wanted to wiggle their way in rather than force their way into the compound. They were outnumbered even though they already had a police battalion on their standby. Here is the unique part. It took them 8 hours to figure out that Asaram was in fact not inside that compound and that he was on the run. Police teams were dispatched simultaneously to multiple locations to try to track where Asaram had absconded to. Next, the Ministry of Home Affairs circulated what is known as a be on the lookout circular so that the godman could not flee the country. Arresting Asaram was a game of many maneuvers, and initially everything was done in absolute secrecy so that the godman couldn't come and surrender before the police was fully ready, or that he could cut a sorry figure, or claim that the government was coming to get him. The police wanted to arrest him, but until the arrest took place, this man was roaming around with complete impunity and without any fear. He continued holding his discourses in public and would swiftly move from one compound to the next literally every single night. With the information and the medical evidence, the police could have arrested him immediately, but they decided to take their time and fatten the report against him so that he could not wiggle his way out of this case. The Jodhpur police put out a series of statements, and the Public Relations Office of Asaram put out statements refuting what the police was saying. I'll put all that on the screen, but I don't have the time to read this out loud because I have to tell you about all the murders that are going to happen. To keep the godman's legal team and his supporters in a state of utter confusion, the police kept giving out contrary information to his legal team by telling them that the police didn't have enough evidence to actually arrest the godman. In an effort to block the godman's followers from setting cities on fire, the police commissioner then held a conference and later shared evidence and also shared the fact that a be on the lookout circular had been secured from the Ministry of Home Affairs. The evidence that the police commissioner shared with the media is as follows. Number 1, the victim's grade 10 certificate, just to corroborate that this girl was underage. Number 2, the fact that she had given an accurate description of the crime scene. Number 3, it was her medical report. Number 4, evidence proving that the godman himself actually owned some of the property where he had assaulted this girl. And number 5 was the mobile forensic records which support that he conspired with the warden Shilpi and another person called Prakash. Few hours of the press conference, the police then leaked the whereabouts of the godman to the media, and every single news channel descended on the city of Bhopal. Now, hundreds of cameras were chasing the godman from Bhopal to Indore, 2 different places inside Madhya Pradesh, and he was fleeing from one place to the other just to avoid all the cameras in his face. In the meantime, the police had flushed all the areas with hundreds of plain-clothes police officers, the Pradesh State Police, along with the police that came from the state of Rajasthan. And all these people were mingled in with the hundreds of followers of Asaram in the city of Indore. Next, Indian Army commandos, which are basically like our SEAL Team 6 delegation, some of them entered the Indore compound with a female police officer whose name was Chanchal Mishra, along with 2 other police officers. But she took the lead and walked into Asaram's living room to inform him that he had to accompany them back to Jodhpur, because there were allegations against him. The God man was seated there along with his daughter and his son and a few dozen supporters. So imagine how much guts it takes when there are so many people. And this woman just walks in, this tiny woman, and informs him that he needs to come with her. He, of course, says that all this is politically motivated. And then the other police inspectors, one of whose name is Satish and the other one is Subhash, they continue to ignore the Godman's protests and start asking him pointed questions about the alleged assault. They take turns cajoling him, coaxing him. Now remember, the police is doing all this because despite the presence of the army and so many police officers, they're completely outnumbered. It takes them hours and hours to negotiate with Asaram and his legal team. In the meanwhile, the media is redirected by the police to another place so that a safe exit can be arranged, as hundreds of people are already protesting all over the streets in Indore. Eventually, the Godman says that he agrees to accompany the police in the morning, and when he thinks that no one's listening, the Godman speaks to his own son in the Sindhi language and tells him to gather thousands and thousands of protesters and devotees so that the police cannot arrest him. Now, when Asaram is speaking in Sindhi, he assumes that no one from the police force or the army commandos actually understand that language, but he is completely wrong, because Inspector Satyaprakash hears this and he makes a parallel plan in his head, and with that parallel plan, with utter stealth, the very small police team outside actually demolishes one part of the compound's wall on the rear side, and they take out Asaram in an ordinary car. While half of the police is still stationed outside the main gate, they don't even know what's happening on the inside, because all this is happening very spontaneously as events are unfolding. In the end, as Asaram sees that the police is trying to catch hold of him and they've come to know that he's trying to arrange thousands of more people to come and join the protest, the four army commandos literally pick him up, lift him off, hold him, walk with him, and shove him in a nondescript car with Inspectors Chanchal, Subhash, and Satish. These people go in different cars and they're rushing to get to the airport when they suddenly realize that Inspector Mukta is not with them. Now, this was the core team which had come from Jodhpur to the city of Indore in Madhya Pradesh to arrest Asaram. Fearing what these protesters will do to Mukta makes every single person skip a beat, especially her own husband, who's also a fellow police officer named Satyaprakash. After a while, she finally manages to call the team and lets them know. So next, the Rajasthan state government actually calls up Commissioner Ajay Lamba and offers to airlift his entire team from UP. But Mr. Lamba, the commissioner, refuses and insists that Asaram should sit in an economy seat with the rest of the arresting team, and they're brought to the Delhi airport. As at this time of the night, it was already around 3 a.m. There was no direct flight from Indore to Jodhpur. In the meantime, the entire Delhi airport is flooded with Asaram followers who managed to get on the same local flight as the flight which was taking Asaram from Delhi to Jodhpur. His supporters, mid-flight, start chanting slogans to free their godman. But the small police team, the four commandos, the police army officers, and a very small fleet of flight attendants somehow pacify these people. And finally, Asaram arrives in the city of Jodhpur, which was the crime scene, on September 1st of 2013 at 11 a.m. The police team, of course, feared that millions of people will now gather in the city of Jodhpur. So rather than taking Asaram to a police station, which is usually on main roads so that people can reach there easily, they instead choose to take him to the Rajasthan Armed Constabulary, which is a place where police cadets live and study. Once the Godman was safely secreted in this campus, the team of officers and commandos who had been working so hard for the past 48 hours to get this man from MP, from Madhya Pradesh to Rajasthan, are finally relieved from their duty. All this was a game of hundreds of maneuvers. But now the commissioner, who had played this game of chess, still had a few more things up his sleeve. The commissioner himself goes to the police cadets campus and reaches there at 5 p.m. on September 1 of 2013, and he goes there completely unannounced and just walks in. He sees that the two police officers that have been left in charge of the Godman are actually sitting on wooden chairs while the Godman himself is comfortably seated on a sofa. The commissioner orders the Godman to get up from the sofa and sit on the floor, and the commissioner himself sits on the sofa. As you can tell, this is a power move. As Asaram sees that there is no place for him to sit except on the floor, all his smugness is torn to bits in a few seconds. And then the Godman is asked to recount what he did to that girl, but he hesitates, and then he is taken to the scene of the crime. He is later brought back to the same police cadets campus where his police interrogation takes place for one whole night, and then the next day the police commissioner, Mr. Ajay Lamba, makes sure that the Godman goes through a potency test at a government hospital, so that later on this man can't claim that he is impotent and hence could not have assaulted the child. On September 2nd of 2013, the Godman was taken into judicial custody. The entire team of police officers that I told you about earlier, every single one of them, started getting threatening and menacing calls against them and their families by the followers of Asaram. All of them were intimidated, and most of them had to, because remember, these arresting officers are the ones who later have to be at the court to testify every single step that they've taken so far. Every single person on this team was offered obscene amounts of money to say that the entire thing was just politically motivated. For their own safety, some of these officers, especially the female officers, had to be moved to another district just to keep them safe. The police commissioner himself, Mr. Lamba, and his family was constantly under police surveillance because there were so many threatening calls and intimidating things that were happening around him. In fact, his own children had to stop going to school for a while. Now, Commissioner Lamba's own parents live in a very small little village in the interior somewhere, and Asaram's followers even managed to get to his parents to intimidate his parents who were in their late 70s. The public prosecutors who were supposed to represent the victims were threatened so much that one after another, even they refused to take this case on. But finally, somehow, in November 2013, as the government changed in 2014, the Commissioner Lamba was moved, and later on he came to know that evidence was being collected to prove the victim wrong. A charge sheet was finally filed against the Godman after a few dozen public prosecutors declined to take this case because of the fear of their own safety. Finally, one Mr. Solanki, who was a lawyer, and his mentor Mr. Verma bravely took on this case. Now, this is such a landmark case that actually there's been a movie which has been made about Mr. Solanki, and I'll place the trailer of that movie in the description box below. On the other hand, the Godman himself engaged the most expensive lawyers of the country to argue on his behalf just so that he can get a bail. His bail was rejected for a record 12 times. 6 times by the trial court, 3 times by the Rajasthan High Court, and 3 times by the Supreme Court of India. After this, while all this was happening, Asaram's own son, Narayan Sain, was also arrested by another state, which is the state of Gujarat, for a similar assault. And the allegation there was by two sisters. Now, before you feel any kind of pangs of sympathy stirring in your heart for all the women who are in the Asaram family, please don't, because all these women were actively helping both of these depraved men. In December 2013, 4 months after his father was outed as being a prolific abuser, these two sisters basically told the police about a decade-long saga where the eldest sister was allegedly assaulted by Asaram systematically from the year 1997 to the year 2006, while the younger sister was assaulted by Narayan Sain, the son, from the year 2002 till the year 2005. The case against Asaram began to be heard nearly on a day-to-day basis, which is quite an achievement in India in itself, on March 19 of 2014, with 58 prosecution witnesses. In the meantime, the defense of the Godman changed hands from one expensive lawyer to the next expensive lawyer. This whole time, every single witness was so fearful of their life because so many of these witnesses died in the duration of this case. One of the main witnesses who was killed by the supporters of the Godman was the former physician of the Godman, a man by the name of Amrut Prajapati. Second, acid was thrown in the face of another witness called Dinesh Bhakchandani, followed by similar attacks on another man called Rakesh Patel, and then yet another witness called Arvind Vajpayee. In the meantime, his name was Kripal Singh Thakur. He was the neighbor of the victim. He was shot dead. Now the victim herself, the child, 16-year-old girl, she was cross-examined for a remarkable 27 days. Her mother was cross-examined for 19 days and her father was cross-examined by 18 days by a series of defense lawyers. It took a total of 4 years. You heard that right. It took them 4 years to record and cross-examine this entire testimony. And remember, this case was actually happening on a day-to-day basis. This entire procedure began in the November of 2013 and ended in March of 2018. On April 25th of 2018, finally the verdict came out, and the verdict was this. A person called Sharad and a woman called Shilpi, both of them were given 20 years in prison. Asaram, the Godman himself, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, he's still trying to appeal this verdict. Unfortunately, multiple thousands of his supporters still exist in the country. But let me end with the wise words of the Honorable Judge in this case. Now, the Honorable Judge Madhusudan Sharma said, quote, "The accused, by committing the despicable and heinous crime, has not merely shattered the faith of his devotees in him, but has harmed the reputation of saints among all common people," unquote. I think we all agree with the wise words of the judge. Please let me know your thoughts in the description box below.